then I started moving a lot. And as I was moving, I became much more interested in reading about books that showed other cultures, people living in other countries, other religions as well, because I was always interested in the world. So obviously books are the best way to learn about the world because you can't travel literally everywhere.
Welcome to the Bookish Expats podcast, where we explore places and cultures from an expat's point of view. Yes, we have had a name change, and there are more lovely changes coming to your ears by the time we start season 4 in July 2019. In this podcast episode, we talked to Tatjana. In her words, quote, a German married to an Indian Chinese or a Chinese Indian, depending on the mood of the day, unquote. Tatjana grew up wanting to live in different countries, so she went into hospitality in order to do so. Of course, at the same time, she read voraciously. In fact, while living in Dubai, one of the 6 cities she has called home thus far, she met her husband. Just before she moved to India to be with him, she started reading the works of Indian author Chetan Bhagat, and thus began her book-education of India and Indian culture. I was fortunate enough to sit down with Tatjana in my home in Shanghai and chat with her about some of Chetan's books that had an impact on her life in India. We also dig into her bookology, her favorite books and places to read them, and so much more. A special thank you needs to go to Nicole from the Expat cast, who started an avalanche of bookish things happening to this podcast episode. One is Expat Rewind, going exclusively bookish, is a direct result of Nicole interviewing me about bookish things on her podcast. I'll put the link to that interview below. 2 is Tatjana listened to a particular episode with me and Nicole and contacted me to find out what bookish places she should go to while she was visiting Shanghai. It is that conversation that led to this very interview. So thank you, Nicole. Hashtag book love. Without further ado, let's dig into Tatjana's expat book story. Thank you so much, Tatjana, for being on Expat Rewind, the bookish version.
Thank you for having me.
This year, we're veering the podcast away from any artifact that helped an expat in their first year in a country towards specifically books. You're our first expat guest to come in with a fiction book, so I'm very excited for today.
Me too.
Yay. Can you give us an idea of your geographical history? Where have you lived in the world?
Sure. I'm German born and raised. I grew up in Germany, went to school there. However, moved to the Netherlands to study there, hotel management. And part of my studies was an internship, a half year in Manchester, UK. And then back to the Netherlands, then 1 year of work in Switzerland, Zurich. And then I got the opportunity to go to Dubai and was living there for 3 years. And that's also where I met my husband, or then boyfriend, now husband. And he moved quickly back to India, where he was from. And I stayed on in Dubai. So we did 2.5 years, roughly, long distance. And eventually, obviously, if you want to bring the relationship forward, obviously we want to be together. So eventually I moved to India. And that was 5.5 years ago. 5 years in Mumbai and the last 6 months in Goa.
Will you stay in India for a long time now, or?
No, we never know. So my husband is still in hospitality, and we basically move around every 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And we usually get to know like maybe a month out. So that's us.
A month?
Yeah, usually it's quite quick. Wow. Once it's decided, it's get and go.
Right. That's very quick, especially with the family.
Yeah, so eventually we hope, obviously, that once our daughter starts school, that we will be able to get a bit more of a ahead.
That's your geographical movement. How about your book movement? When did you start becoming a bookworm?
Quite frankly, I've always been a bookworm. I remember reading during high school, etc. as well, quite a lot as well, a lot of fiction always. And then I moved to the Netherlands, obviously during studies, because you read so much for your studies, there was a little less reading for pleasure. However, what I do remember is that I always loved bookstores and libraries, etc. So that was always in my life. I think then also during the time when I was working full time in the UK, Switzerland and Dubai, it's the same thing. It's like a lot lot of bookstores I remember, but I don't remember much about the books I read. So I read very few books. Then I moved to India, and because I didn't have a full-time job, I obviously had the opportunity to read much more. And also that's actually when I started tracking my books, which is, I think, the reason why I remember much more about the books that I read like in the last few years.
What do you mean tracking your books? What do you do?
I use Goodreads a lot, and I just started being members of book clubs as well. And I think the moment you start discussing books, obviously after you read them, the more they stick in your mind in a way.
How many book clubs are you in now?
So right now, because we just literally moved a half year ago, so I haven't gotten any local ones as of now. I have, I think, 2 online ones, mainly Facebook book clubs. In Mumbai, I had 2 book clubs like that physically met. So one was, I was part of the American Women's Club in Mumbai. So that was an expat club. I was part of their book club. And I did one local Mumbaikar book club there. So that was very interesting too.
Have you run any book clubs?
Yeah, so the one for the American Women's Club actually was sort of run by me, yeah.
When you first started reading a lot, what kind of things were you reading?
So I read pretty much always only fiction. And in the beginning, I read a lot of historic fiction, a lot of classics also. I remember starting off with things like Jane Austen. I loved Alexandre Dumas, who I think is way underrated. I love that guy. Three Musketeers, I think it's fairly well known. Then I started moving a lot, and as I was moving, I became much more interested in reading about books that showed other cultures, people living in other countries, other religions as well, because I was always interested in the world. So obviously books are the best way to learn about the world, because you can't travel literally everywhere. And so, yeah, that's what I read a little more. And after I left my full-time job and moved to India, I was reading a little bit more nonfiction, just because I felt that I needed something to occupy my mind, and that I felt was nonfiction just to learn, basically, about various fields.
Are most people in your family bookworms as well?
So the funny thing is, apparently my dad's aunt, who I've never met, basically... My dad inherited her book collection, which was massive, like a library. However, that was like really those old leather-bound, really, really fancy books. And some of them, in fact, in old writing, which is really difficult to read as well. Some of them are really like classic books that I read as well. So my parents read, but I wouldn't necessarily call them bookworms as such. So once in a while, a book, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, mine too. My parents didn't really read a lot. My mom read more of like interesting kind of quirky articles in a newspaper, and my dad read like, not comic books, but like joke books.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know, but I think all of my older brother, older sister, and I read a lot of different things, and I'm not quite sure where we picked it up from.
So it's the funniest thing. Honestly, for me, I think I don't know how I get there, but we were living in a small village, so maybe it's just the fact that there wasn't much entertainment around, but there was a library, and so we had a library pass, and that was just a lot to explore there, basically. So I think that maybe would have been part of it. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was also pre-internet. So that was the only source of other information.
And actually, we were living together with my grandma. I remember she was reading quite a bit. And she was reading also, like, for instance, they made it into a movie, The Geisha, the history of a geisha, that became quite famous. So, like, those kind of stuff as well. Because actually, the funny thing is that my grandparents, together with my dad, lived in China in the 60s.
No way.
For 2 years.
Where?
So they were in Beijing back then. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why I was always more interested in the East versus in the West, sort of. That's always been more interesting. So I think that's also why my grandma read those kind of stories, sort of, from her history background.
What were they doing in Beijing for 2 years?
Good question. My granddad, if I remember the story right, my granddad worked for the trading ministry, whatever sort of thing, and so he was posted there, and my grandma came with him, and my dad was like 2 years at that point or something, very, very young, but apparently he spoke Chinese first, actually, because he had a Chinese speaking nanny, and that was his first language, but obviously lost completely.
Are you going up to Beijing on this trip, or?
No, we don't.
Okay.
No, we won't have the time, because my husband is here on work and will be here. for this week.
One more question before we get to the specific books that you literally have in front of you, which is so cool. I'm so excited that you brought the physical books. Oh, and this is a good time to give a shout out to Nicole from the Expat Cast. Can you share the story of how you're now in my living room in Shanghai?
Exactly. Yeah, this has actually been really funny. So I'm fairly new to podcasts as well in terms of listening to podcasts as well. And I just found Nicole's podcast maybe 3-4 weeks ago, and I just loved it because it's the best way to find out about expats and what they're doing. And she is as an expat living in Germany. I am from Germany. And so I listened to her, I basically binge listened to her podcast and heard the one that you did as well, where she interviewed you specifically on books. And then 2 weeks ago, just out of the blue, became us traveling to Shanghai. I was like, wait, Stephanie's in Shanghai. And I thought, you're the perfect person to ask about what bookstore to go to in Shanghai. And that's how we actually connected over Instagram. And then overnight, literally, it became this, let's meet up and let's do this podcast.
Well, it's funny because that bookish interview that I did with Nicole was the reason that I'm reshaping Expat Rewind this year. Because I was like, okay, now that I've been on yours, I need to keep talking about books because I realized, even though it's a huge part of my life, I hadn't actually brought it over into the podcasting part of my life. And that's ridiculous.
No, it's not, because I actually have 2 separate Instagram accounts, and one is an expat Instagram account, the other one is a book Instagram account, because it feels like if you talk a lot about books and then there's one expat story, or vice versa, a lot of expat stuff and then one book, and I felt it just never it doesn't always line up so that it fits together.
Yeah, exactly. But during that chat with Nicole, it did start to.
True.
And I was like, oh, and I was kind of wavering with trying out different things. We did, like, in the first season of Expat Rewind, not to get too meta, but I'm probably going to. We did photographs and Twitter streams and all kinds of different things. And it never quite felt right. So when we had that conversation at the end, I was like, Nicole, you need to come on and do a book interview.
Yeah.
I need to reshape this. So by the end of 2019, it's going to be completely just books because of that very interview. So yeah, super, super crazy shout out to Nicole if you guys aren't listening to her podcast. Okay, the final question before we get to those books. When you moved countries, did your book reading change? You mentioned you went from fiction to nonfiction, but were there any other changes?
I think it was less the country change and more the occupation change that made the difference, because as said that in the beginning I was working full-time or studying and then working full-time. And so reading was just purely leisure and sort of shutting down after work. Versus then I moved to India, I didn't have a full-time work. So at that point I could branch out more towards what I could and want to read. And that's what I did.
That sounds like a beautiful change.
Yeah, it was. It was lovely. And I think otherwise I might not have gone there, but I'm very happy that I did. And in fact, one of the first books I read after that was Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg, CEO of Facebook. That was a brilliant book. Like, it was a pity I didn't read that while I was still working, because I could have applied that to my work and helped other people with that book. And it just, it came too late for that, but obviously you can still apply it now. But yeah.
So let's dive in. What book did you pick for this episode?
I didn't exactly. I more actually picked an author more than a book as such. As I was mentioning, I met my husband, who's an Indian Chinese, and we met in the UAE, and he went back fairly quickly. So it became clear to me that we're going to be married, but obviously I might live in India as well. So I was really interested to learn more about the country, not just as an expat, sort of, how do people live, but a little more about society. When all of this went through my mind, I happened to see a book in the bookstore, and I picked it up, and it was by an author called Chetan Bhagat. Now, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. He is a very well-known author. However, in sort of high literary circles, he doesn't have much of a reputation. He writes sort of easy stories, a very simple way. Many people say, it's just rubbish, and just, you pick it up, you quickly read it for 2 hours or whatever, and then you're done with the book.
And what's wrong with that?
I don't understand that either. What I enjoy so much about the books, which I probably understand why Indians would not, is that he really writes about daily life and what the issues of society are. And I think that might be just too simple for Indians, because that's what they live every day. But that's exactly what I want to get to know out of that. I started one book and just picked one up after the other and kept reading. reading. The first one that I read, I don't actually have with me. It's called Revolution 2020, which is about the rampant money laundering that goes on in India when it comes to education. So universities and schools being built just to wash money, and what actually goes into it in terms of quality of education, etc., is secondary.
Gotcha. Let's hold on just a second there. So where were you when you read that first book?
Dubai.
You were in Dubai.
Yes.
Okay. So you were already met your husband. You knew you were going to move
Correct.
to India.
I probably didn't know at that point that I was going to move, but obviously I was traveling quite a bit already, and he is Indian somewhat. So it was always going to be a part of it. There was always a chance, obviously, we're going to move as well.
And what was your reaction to that book when you were first reading it?
Honestly, I take another book as well, which I think was the biggest. It's another one that I read afterwards called Two States. And that for me, sort of, it opened up a huge thing, because this book is really about the marriage of the author. It's sort of autobiographical as well. And the funny thing is that it speaks about the different castes in India as well, and how difficult it can be if somebody from a higher caste would marry somebody from a lower caste. However, this book is about two people from normal middle classes meeting up in a high education setting as well, both of them studying, and they fall in love and they think there's nothing easier than this because we're both in the same level, so what could be the problem? However, he is all the way from the north of India, she is from the south, and there could probably be nothing more different than those two groups of people. And this book is about their getting to know each other, and even more so about their parents meeting each other and the people, basically. Yeah. The back cover says, love marriages around the world are simple. Boy loves girl, girl loves boy, they get married. In India, there are a few more steps. Boy loves girl, girl loves boy. Girl's family has to love boy, boy's family has to love girl. Girl's family has to love boy's family, boy's family has to love girl's family. Girl and boy still love each other, they get married. So I love just that back cover, basically, and that's why I bought the book.
Okay, so with those two books in mind, Revolution and Revolution 2020 and Two States, does he always have numbers in his titles? What's the third one?
I've never thought about that, but
okay.
It's actually true. There's not, a lot of them. One Indian girl.
Funny. Well, okay, let's side note that, because I listened to a couple of short interviews with the author.
Okay.
And if I remember right, he was a businessman or in finance
correct.
first?
Yes.
So maybe that's where the numbers come from.
So another thing in India is high achieving education, and there's those 5 top universities in India, and if you manage them, then you get the high paying jobs, and everybody wants those. So he's out of one of those universities. He did work in the finance field as well, and then he became an author only.
Now, when did you learn this information about the author? Was it after reading some of these or before?
Probably there's this little short autobiography always about the books as well, but I read that, but that I really got into it was only probably after 2-3 books that I read from him.
When you were first reading Revolution 2020 and Two States, what were your reactions to these two books?
I was really surprised. On the one hand, obviously, how much do you really know about India if you don't particularly take an interest in it? The funny thing is, I had watched a few of the Bollywood movies, the big Indian film industry.
Yes.
However, obviously, and they do show that a little bit, but the movies are always about one person being on the high, very rich family, the other one being from a very low-class family, and that's the tricky point of the movie. And obviously, especially Two States, is actually about two similar middle-class families, and the problem becomes that they're from very different localities, which makes a difference. That really opened up my mind to the diversity of India, and that's really something that you probably cannot grasp if you don't get there and you see that India is one country, but that's not it. There is no India. There is, it's for the States, East Coast, West Coast. So we have the same thing in Germany, West and East, or and that's even more so in India. It's so huge country, and you have that between cities like Mumbai and Delhi. They're fighting sort of, and the same thing between East and West, North and South, even more so. And that really became apparent to me.
Now, you said your husband's Indian, kind of. What does that mean?
So my husband is Indian Chinese. That means he's actually born in India and he speaks Hindi and he is Indian from like documentary point of view. However, because both his parents originate from China, he looks completely Chinese. And that becomes a little tricky then because he looks Chinese, but he speaks and everything is Indian basically.
Because you're reading these books that include stories about people from different castes or people from the same caste. How does that work when he grows up in India as an Indian kind of, and then he marries a non-Indian, definitely? How does that all work?
In the beginning, when I moved to India, I applied for jobs. And one of the interviews, I got asked, what caste is my husband? And till date, I can't answer because my husband doesn't have an answer to that. Because caste system is obviously a very Indian system. Because they're Chinese, they still kind of fall out of that system.
So there's no caste for people who move into India after that was originated.
Because also officially the caste system doesn't exist anymore, right? You're officially, it's not supposed to in a way. However, the whole system of untouchables, etc., is still very much there. And the more rural you get, the more so. However, because we are living mainly in urban cities, sort of that was never an issue. So and you're not supposed to be asked that question, and yet obviously you are. However, so I can't even answer that question where he falls in that system.
Speaking of falling within a system, this podcast falls within the podcast ecosystem. I know, I'm stretching the realm of transition here, but honestly, we're a podcast. Clearly, we're a podcast. And sometimes I'm a little subtle about what I do with these podcasts. So I want to be very unsubtle, also known as blunt. So here I go. Currently, I have 3 podcasts: Virtual Expats, Expat Rewind, which is turned into Bookish Expats, and Changing Scripts podcast, which is about Mandarin Chinese. However, things are changing very quickly in a beautiful way. In June, I will have a new podcast with a wonderful co-host, Summer. The podcast is called Creatively Complicated. In that particular podcast, we'll be talking about the messiness of our creative life. Not creative process so much, but why we struggle with the term creative, what we do and don't do that we consider creative, and different things that we find in the media and around us in life that talks about creativity in a way that makes us think and reevaluate what the hell we're doing by using this word in every word form of it. Creative, creatively, creativity, all those kinds of things. There's a lot of changes happening, and I'm really excited to have you along.
So as you were reading these books and reading about Indians and the caste systems and the relationships in the culture, were there bits of the stories that you could relate to your husband and or his family?
It's just really the fact how people have very set ideas about everybody else, about themselves even, but also about every other group. The story specifically is North and South. So the North, Punjab, the state is called Punjab, and those people are really known to party and loud, noisy, lots of alcohol, lots of meat. Their weddings is the really late night. Everybody gets drunk and dances, and that's sort of Punjab. Okay. Down south is much more sort of religious. They're both religious, but they celebrate that in a different way, you could say. So down south, it's much more quiet. We don't drink, we don't eat meat. And it really culminates, and spoiler, if anybody reading that, they do eventually get married. And the 2 weddings, basically, if you were to have 2 weddings, the further north, you do in the evening, late night, and you party the whole night through. Down south, no parties, but the wedding is like 5 o'clock in the morning, and you get together and you know, all what you have in mind with the fire and the bride and groom walking around the fire, and early morning, very sacred sort of. You literally couldn't go more different. And this is how the book, basically what the book is about.
So many countries have a north-south divide or difference.
In Germany, it's more east and west because of history-wise, obviously, and maybe it's really the stretch of the country. So India is more north and south stretch, so you have the more diversity.
That's true. And I was thinking of Italy with my parents. There's a definite north-south difference there too, because it's longer. And
I think it may be also then the climate almost that makes a difference, because obviously north of India means you have the Himalayas there. It's getting freezing cold at night there, or during the winter times. Where the south, where you have like like, it's much more warmer, much more level climate, and the food very diverse, etc., etc. So I think that might make a difference.
But how many do you have today? You have 3 there.
I brought one more, which is one of his latest, actually. It's called One Indian Girl. And that actually, why I grabbed that is because it's really an interesting topic he picks up there, which is arranged marriage, which is another thing that happens in India still, which for me, not being in an arranged marriage, and obviously that not being a practice in Germany at all anymore, has always been completely fascinating for me, because the idea of marrying somebody who you shared, a couple talks, like a couple cups of coffees basically with each other, is to me completely, it couldn't get further from what we lived through basically. That has really opened my mind, because she's really going through that with the same thoughts, like, oh my God, I'm supposed to marrying this guy, and I don't know him. I don't know what he likes, what he's like, except what he has told me about himself in those couple of Skype conversations.
And we know how much people don't know about themselves from dating at some point in our life, right? So that's challenging.
Yes. And what you share, what you choose to share as well. And now, not many people necessarily, like, even in India, in the urban India today, not many people anymore go through arranged marriages, but living together is not common before marriage, I mean. And I think you learn a lot about your partner during that time. Yes. Who does the trash, cooking, they're doing the dishes, those kind of things. Now, in a lot of families in India, you have a maid who does it for you. So fair enough. But still, there's still things that you learn from one another living together. And that's just not happening. That's really, really not happening. So that's really, to me, so interesting.
That puts a lot of pressure on the first few years of a marriage.
Yes. Yeah. Plus, then what happens a lot still is that the woman moves into her husband's house, which usually then contains also the husband's parents. And I don't know out there how many people want to live with their in-laws, but it becomes another set of pressure put on the new couple, other than getting to know one another, but living together with a big family also.
From what I understand in traditional Chinese culture, it is very similar where they move in. I don't remember I think it's with the husband's family, but in modern China, it's less and less. It's happening less and less.
And same in urban India as well, that more and more families are really living apart. However, the problem is that that hasn't picked up, like, for instance, what you have in the West, that you have like elderly living homes, etc., because they're really used to being taken care of by their kids at certain age, basically, and that system is not there. So if you just leave your parents alone, then the question really becomes who takes care of them once they can't do it themselves anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's happening in China, that's one of the things that is widely covered by the Western media, is that because of the one-child policy, now the one child has to take care of the husband and wife, if that were the structure that we're talking about, has to take care of 4 people. So there's a lot of pressure. Yes. Because then they'd have their own kids, because they get married and have kids so young, and then they have 4 parents to take care of, with the 2 of them with children in the relationship too. So it's a lot of pressure.
Yes,
a lot of financial pressure.
And and I mean, that was always the reason in India why people were so upset, sort of, when they had daughters. They wanted sons, so that like the son stays with them, the daughter-in-law comes in, and there's somebody to take care of them. And however, just the same as in China as well, then the number of sort of kids is coming down in India as well. And I think there's a lot of change afoot, sort of.
There's a lot of change happening. There's a lot of parallels, now that I think about it, between China and India, development-wise, tradition-wise, history-wise. Not so much history-wise, but I mean, there's a lot more overlap in this family structure that we're talking about than I even thought about until right about now.
It might still be the case that you're no longer living in big family homes, everybody together, etc. However, the importance of family is still there. So what your parents say to your boyfriend or girlfriend, whether or not that person is, you can go ahead and marry them, etc., there's still a lot of pressure on that. For me, that's obviously in the West. It's so you move out when you're moving to college or university or whatever it may be, and you're so excited about getting your independence, living alone by yourself, etc., etc. And in India, it's still very much the case that you live with your parents until you get married, and either your spouse moves in with you or you move in with your spouse and their parents, whatever it may be. That independence never really happens, and that to me is like,
to play the devil's advocate here, then there's also an increasing sense of like isolation and depression. I don't know about in Europe, but in the US, there's a lot of people that go to university, find jobs, et cetera, and then they live alone, and maybe they can't find a spouse, and they're alone. They're not tight with their family. They don't have a new family. And there's just such an isolated, depressed,
and I think especially also then in the once the families get older, like the parents when they get older and are left alone because the kids are halfway across the country living somewhere else, what happens to them? I'm kind of hoping that social media would really help with that sort of going forward, because that's certainly how we connected. We were talking about that, and I hope that's certainly how I stay in contact with my parents. WhatsApp, videos, pictures, everything, and that's probably the best thing out of the whole situation.
It's so true. But it feels like there are two extremes that we're talking about, of being isolated and alone because you have so much independence, and then there not being a choice and family's just there all the time.
Yeah.
So it's like, where's that middle ground of wanting your family to be together, but still having some sort of independent life
and I think
within that?
It's just going to take a generation, because the parent generation right now still very much has that idea in mind where, no, we're all living together, one big happy family. It doesn't matter if we're happy, but we're one big happy family. However, I think now the younger we grow, sort of, I think it will become more and more the case where even the older generation realizes that, the young generation has to take off. You have to be flexible for work as well. If your job brings you to another city, that's what it is. And either the parents move with you, but probably that won't be the case. So I think that just with the generations have to come.
Well, the characters in the books that you've got here, how are they dealing with this? Are they being torn between the independence and family issue, or are they...
They're very, very much so about local issues as well, in terms of, studying in one place, family in another, getting a job in a third city. How do we manage that? I think especially in two states with the two marriages, obviously this north versus south, bringing family together. I think the young generation is really portrayed as very progressive, young, modern Indians, but still very much realizing that their parents have a older, traditional view on the whole point, and obviously trying to manage those different viewpoints between the generations. But it's not easy, and that's welcome to life.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, being someone who's from a fairly new country. I mean, granted, my parents are from Italy, which is has a much longer history, but then even Italy as a country is kind of a loose idea also. Yeah, so it's just like, but coming from just an American perspective, as if I can cut that off of my head, it's so hard to think of, kind of bucking up against a very long history like that, of those traditions that you want to keep, but also have these other characteristics that exist that you kind of want to play with too. It's like, how do you balance the old and the new?
And I think that's a lot where, especially the young generation, is really looking towards going abroad, because that's for them the typical, the grass is greener on the other side. If we're living abroad, then that's heaven. And that's in one Indian girl. So she is such a hardworking, and she has a big job, a big finance job as well, and she makes millions of dollars basically, and she's so proud of that. And yet when she calls her family, which she less and less does because she's afraid that the only topic that she's talking about is, okay, have you found a boyfriend? When are you going to get married? Are you going to come home? Is he Indian? That sort of thing. And she can't be bothered about it. Why can't you be proud for me, even though I'm not a son, I'm your daughter, but look at what I have accomplished. But that doesn't matter. You're now 27 and you're still not married, and what are you planning to do about that? That becomes the key issue. And that is something, so what she does really is travel all over the world. She lives in New York, Hong Kong, London, because she fears that if she moves to India, to her family, there is no way of getting off of that problem of, when are you getting married?
And that's something that's happening a lot here. We were talking about before we pressed record, we were talking about how there's been at least a generation or two of young Chinese university students who go overseas to different countries and then come back. And a lot of them have come back, and they're going to be... They either are the new parents now, or they're going to be the next generation of parents soon. And so are they going to perpetuate these traditional ideas, or are they going to bring in some of those things they learned in the different places and kind of make a new tradition?
And that's again also the question, are you living in a big family home? Because then obviously grandparents also have a say in how the kids grow up. And so that's then you're trying to bring up your child with this modern views of how life could be like. And your grandparents say, or the grandparents saying, well, but we used to do it that way or this way, or that doesn't help.
Well, oftentimes in China, especially now when the competition's so tight, the parents are working a lot and the grandparents will essentially raise the child and spend most of the time with the child.
Even more so then the grandparents will have more impact on how the child grows up than the parents actually. So what do you do?
And I'm just an outsider basically looking in while I'm in the culture. So it's just it's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Sorry, the biggest impact that the books had on you.
Mm-hmm. Again, I'm repeating myself here, but it's really for me that he is showing how life is really like in India. What are the problems that are coming up and what are everyday Indians dealing with in their lives? And a lot of this has been so different from what I'm used to from the West, from Europe, or even like I was living in Dubai for a while, also very, very different, that I think the book has taught me a lot about that life, the background basically, that I otherwise wouldn't have found out just living in a city, just sort of looking around. You don't really, you see certain points of it. Like for instance, I was mentioning that education is so important in India. It comes to the point that there's a 10 standard examination and those results get posted on buses. So there's pictures of kids with their, this kid made 98 percentile in their class. And those buses go by and with newspapers, full pages printed of lists, what kid made what kind of percentile. That is so crazy to me because obviously the push or the pressure that puts on kids and then the whole society, if your kid doesn't make a certain percentile, everybody knows, and what will they say? All of that, you will see that bus going by, you will wonder, why are those pictures on the bus? And some of those books just taught me a lot about this background that I otherwise wouldn't have had. And to me, it's become really apparent that, for instance, I can now watch some of the Indian comedians because some of the jokes they crack, I sort of inside jokes basically, and that I understand now. I probably might not have, or much later anyway. Because it's also, those are things that I read and understand, but unless you read that and understand that, you don't even think about asking those questions, right? Why would you? And so this is really what the books have done for me.
So let's backtrack. You read the books, you went to India. Did you, because some of these are the romance stories and whatnot. A lot of those aspects seem like they would be like stories about the home that you wouldn't necessarily see as you're walking around or having business interactions with folks. So is there any time when you first got to India that something happened and you're already nodding yes, that something happened, thank you, that something happened and you thought, I read about that in the book or one of the books?
Because I think the difference for me is that we weren't an expat couple moving to India. But because my husband is Indian and he was working there and obviously we lived there, but he had Indian friends. So whenever we would meet up, not that we were talking all the time about the arranged marriages of friends or whatsoever, but we would speak a lot about those issues about, for instance, one colleague of his that is a Parsi, which is a very special, I think from Iran group basically. And they're particularly, they are very proud of their religion and group, and they very much marry within each other. Those kind of things. It's just that when we talk about that, I always refer back to the books. I've read about something like that. But even, for instance, I have a daughter, she goes to play school, and at some point, really somebody was saying, your marriages, were they arranged, like into the group of parents around them? And obviously in Germany, that question would never even appear. Why, But in that group, actually, I think we were about 10 moms, and there was, I think, 1 or 2 moms who said, my marriage was arranged. And that was normal to talk about, and that was very, very interesting, sort of. But I think we were also talking about that before. It's just that India is much more, you talk with each other and you get very quickly very personal. You ask questions that I would never ask somebody in Germany when I just get to know them. And if that's an interview or in a sort of more personal setting, but in India that's very much the case, that you very quickly start speaking very personal.
I love the 5 questions. Every country seems to have a set of like 3 to 5 questions that people ask when you first meet them.
Yes.
What are those questions in India?
I think probably the question that we will all have as expats is, where are you from? That's
not the expats, the locals.
Yeah,
like,
but
okay,
yeah. I mean, between locals, you mean? Among the locals, or because obviously the thing is that both of us, you living in China, me in India, we look very different from the people there. That's naturally the first question.
Sure.
I usually get questions about my daughter. I usually also do I like India, etc. What I found really interesting is that when Indian friends meet, something that people discuss a lot is money, and that is something that in the West, I don't know, in Germany is not a point of discussion. How much do you make? How much rent are you paying? And those kind of things. Like, no, you don't discuss money, right?
Okay, I have to do an American high five right now. And I say that for a very specific reason. I thought that wasn't done in the U.S. either. But I was corrected by my husband, who is also American, but from a very different part of the country than I grew up. And he said that they did. So there's at least a group in Idaho of people that do this. And I'm sure there's more than that. But where I grew up, you don't discuss rent. You don't discuss how much you make. You don't, like, if you're really, really, really close friends, then you might compare if you're trying to help each other out with, maybe you could save money by doing this kind of thing.
Right.
But in a group of people, no, especially people that might be friends of friends, you just don't talk. If somebody asks you how much you make and you don't really know them, exactly, you make that face. It's like, what? Yeah. Deep friendships are hard here because the cultures are so different between foreigner and local. The top 5 questions, one of them does include how much do you make, and one of them could be how much is your rent. So there are financial questions in the first few things. And I'm talking like taxi drivers, somebody in a restaurant, somebody that sits next to you in a cafe, like complete strangers will ask those questions.
So as I was saying, money comes definitely up among friends, certainly in Mumbai. And Mumbai, I have to say, is a very financial driven city because it's a business capital of India. Everybody seems to know what, like, yeah, we are invested. We just picked up a place in XYZ place. Oh yeah, I heard it's really low right now, but it's going to appreciate very much. Everybody seems to know the country, everywhere in the country, what it costs and right now and how much it will appreciate in the next couple of years. That seems to be a common factor, so you know that. However, what comes up even among strangers, sort of especially amongst women, is like, oh, you look good, oh, you lost weight, or you gained weight. So much so that, and I really got upset over that. I'm not very fussy over my weight. This is not something that I'm like crazy over. However, we had friends and we went to their birthday and I was pregnant, so obviously had put on weight. So we met a couple of friends of our friends as well. So 1 year later, same birthday, obviously I had my baby and lost quite a lot of weight. And we meet the same friends of our friends again. And she goes like, oh my God, you look amazing. So, well, gee, thanks, No, I mean, you look really good. It's like, well, I was pregnant last year when we met, but obviously I lost a bit of weight. Yeah, oh my God. And she turns to my husband and she says, oh my God, you have to make sure she doesn't eat any chocolate because she just looks great that way. It's like, well, excuse me. Number 1, my husband doesn't dictate what I eat. Number 2, I feel good right now. Thank you very much. But this is not like my key point of my life to look as I look right now. I mean, so this is something, and looks, I think in general, if for instance, like your skin breaks out, strangers come up to me and say, oh my God, what happened to your face? And those are things, it's just, you don't do that, in Europe, you ignore things like that, you would never pick that, sort of point that out.
Yeah, in fact, in the US, if somebody said, oh, I feel really bad, I have this on my nose today, you'd be like, no, you look great.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
No. Oh, no.
Yeah, and like, again, those kind of conversations only happen between really good friends. You would never really mention that because you're trying to cover it up. You wouldn't go to a colleague or something, like a more further away person.
This is so funny. I had no idea how similar Indian and Chinese culture are on some level. Yeah. When I first moved to Asia, I was in Taiwan, and I rode a scooter everywhere because there wasn't a metro in that city that I was in yet. As I was parking my bike to go to a bookstore, that's so funny. When I was going to a bookstore, about to get into my happy place, this man just walked up to me as I was parking and wanted to tell me something. And his English was very spotty. I spoke almost no Chinese at that point. And he just points to this giant mole that I have on my face, on the side of my face, and then he actually goes into his wallet and hands me a doctor's card and said, "That's bad, you need to fix it," in English. And I'm like, I don't know you. It's my first few months there. I have a bookstore within reach, and I'm just like, I want to go to my happy place. You're making me want to run to my happy place quicker. This is probably a cultural thing. This is probably not meant to be offensive, but all I could think was, I want to punch you. I want to punch you for making me feel embarrassed about my body. Yeah, I was just like, what is happening right now? And I'm like, and I just looked at the card and I looked at him and I was like, no, thank you. And I just walked away as quickly as I could. I was just like, what is happening right now?
Yeah, and you don't know how to react, because I generally think she didn't mean neither did he. He really didn't mean anything bad about it,
which is why I didn't punch him. But it's just, I was like, okay, I'm in your country. Clearly this is what you do here, but that doesn't mean I have to be thankful for it right now. It's like, it's such a crazy moment. In the books, it's just straight Indians. It's just locals with locals kind of environments. Okay.
Not that what comes up with is that I think still very much the fact that for women it's much more the focus is on how you look, that you look good, that you make a sort of an effort about your appearance in terms of also clothing, etc. And it's more apparent or more important that you are married by a certain age. It's very important that you get in a good college for both men and women, for men to make a lot of money, for women to get a man who makes a lot of money. And that's kind of now, I think a lot of people would probably say that's changing. That's true. And it is changing a lot. And I think the advantage is that a lot of women want to have a job. They want to progress in their career. And because of the maids that you can get in the country, it's much more easier as well. However, there's still very much women who say, no, I need a husband, so they can take care of me, basically. So it's crazy. But the whole idea of feminism actually has taken up a lot in the last couple of years, I would say. So there's much more talk about, it's like, no, as a woman, we can do our own, we can live our own life, and we don't need a husband or a man to look after us. And I think that is changing also, but that is also changing from a political point of view in terms of that laws are being changed, that you no longer need a male man, sort of a male person that looks over you and after you, basically. Recently, the law has been changed that you don't have to change your name and your passport when you get married. That's no longer necessary. So those kind of things change and they become sort of more open and more equal.
Has your husband read any of these books?
My husband doesn't read many books. He's more newspaper magazine reader.
Have you talked to him about the things in the books?
I talked to him about things that really struck me, basically. The thing is, because obviously he has never been in an arranged marriage, for instance, so I can't really talk to him about that. He hasn't been to one of those high, fancy flying colleges either. He went to hospitality school as well. I have a friend who went to one of those schools, and basically, and the fact really is that the pressure in those schools is crazy, and you do have like the occasional suicide case where students commit suicide because they can't handle it any longer. I do, obviously it becomes less and less, but in the beginning it was a lot that sort of I had almost a list of questions, and my husband would come home from work like, oh my god, I have to ask you something, sit down and I want to know why or whatever. I remember the funniest thing, I will never forget that first time we went to the movies in India, and the first thing that happens before the movie starts, the Indian national anthem is played, and they're showing the Indian flag, and everybody has to get up. Just before or after the first time we went to it, obviously you get up, la la la. But shortly afterwards, in the magazine, in the newspaper, there was a story where two foreigners had gone to the movies. They didn't know, they stayed seated, and an Indian woman took her handbag and sort of hit them over the head. It's like, how dare you? And like, you should. I'm not sure. Maybe they were busy with their phones or whatever. I don't know what happened, but anyway, they didn't stand up immediately.
I don't know what happened with those two folks in the movie theater, but I know that some of you may want to stand up and volunteer to be a guest on the Bookish Expats. See what I did there? It's really actually quite simple. Contact me and let me know what country you're an expat in and what book helped you learn about that country. Now, with Tatjana, we did cover a few books, not just one, but moving forward, here are the criteria. It's very simple. Are you ready? It's going to be quick. It's going to be a book about the country that you have lived in or are living in, and it needs to be fiction. That's it. Those are the only criteria. If you fit that criteria and you want to stand up and volunteer to be a guest on Bookish Expats, then please let me know. We love that you would want to be bookishly expat heard. Let's do this.
When you first sat down and you had the books, and I'll take a picture for the listeners, so watch out for my Instagram. I'll put it down in the show notes, dear listeners. But you've got all kinds of Post-its and things on it. So how else do you interact with the book? Do you actually write in the books too?
So it's really funny. So generally, when I buy books, I have big trouble giving them away or parting from them. I do have a Kindle that I work with. I have Kindle on my phone as well. And even now, where we moved to now, we have a library. So that's great. But when I do buy a book, I read it. I usually would never draw on there or fold pages or whatsoever, nothing. However, once I realize that this is actually a book that I will be rereading or that I love or that I want to make notes, actually quite a lot of them, I start and then I write all over the book. And that is funny because then the first pages are completely blank. And then you notice at some point I realize, okay, this book I'm going to keep. And then I start writing all over the place. So it becomes really, really used, sort of.
Somebody introduced me to hashtag Bookstagram. And yes, I just said hashtag out loud on Instagram recently. And I was like, what? There's a whole subset. You probably in Bookstagram, I'm guessing.
Yes, yeah. So that there is like, it's nothing more, I think, than a hashtag actually that everybody who speaks about books or whatsoever, but there is actually a lot behind it because obviously then you have the publishers, you have various blogs that are just revolving around the topic. I recently found out there is a whole scene basically that deals with covers, who's made covers, and which is so funny that I never thought about it because there's a saying, right? Don't judge a book by its cover. But yet again, when you exactly. And so many times on Bookstagram, you see people saying, oh my God, this is so pretty. And look, I got a special edition because it's so pretty. And this becomes such a turning point. But yet nobody talks about the people behind those beautiful covers. And so that's something, again, I listened to another podcast. It's called The Women Reading. It's a blog podcast and so forth. And they had a whole podcast with She the People who are dealing mainly with women in the publishing and specifically women in the cover art business. And this is so fantastic because again, obviously a lot of people read mainly, it just happens that a lot of authors are white men, unfortunately. And more now people are trying to breach out in other, like either women are authors or whatsoever. But the same obviously counts for every other industry as well, that women specifically in the art departments of publishers, etc., are not that often.
That's so cool. And wait, what was the book cover? What's the name of it again?
The Reading Women.
Listeners, it'll be in the show notes.
They do fantastic. They do women authors. They do interviews. They do books, etc., etc. And they did one particular podcast with She the People, I think it's called. I give you the one as well. And that's specifically about women in the book art departments.
When you were in the UAE looking for books on India, how did you hone in on these?
I think number one is honestly the fact that the author's name, obviously, it's not US American, like very cliche sort of. It's not US American. It certainly isn't sort of Middle Eastern or whatsoever. And I think the first one that I had picked up, the Revolution 2020, that also has something India related on the cover. And I think that had just come out. So it was located in the bookstore with a special stand saying, you know, from India, whatsoever. So that caught my eye because obviously UAE means that about, I think, 30% of the expats there are actually subcontinent expats. So a lot of that is geared to them. As I was mentioning, it's a lot about the money laundering in the education system, but it's also about a love triangle. So that's why you have those three sort of people on the cover. So that's a bit from that background. But otherwise, I find it very aggressive in a way. Also very dark, and it's actually one of his books, now that I'm thinking about it. A lot of his books tend to be obviously dramatic in a way that there is conflict, etc., but they tend to end on a happy note, sort of happy-go-lucky also in a good way, which I like. I'm still preferring to read sort of happy books also. However, this is probably one of the books that he's written that are darker and make you really think about the dark side of it.
Don't ruin it for us.
No. I'm not going to do it.
So it wasn't the cover at all?
So, no, it wasn't the cover. It was really because I was much more focusing on India, and because this sort of in the shop it was mentioning that, you know, from India, etc., etc. Because in fact I met the author in Dubai because he came from the Dubai Book Fair, and I got my book signed by him and everything. So very exciting.
That's really neat.
And I think he was very excited as well because obviously coming to Dubai and sort of a European picking up his book, I don't think I'm specifically his target market in the first place.
What did you say to him when you met him?
And in fact, I gave him sort of the lowdown of my story with my husband being from India, and you know, we're engaged to get married, and I'm so excited, and India, and I was traveling to India at that point. Once in a while. I think he seemed happy. I mean, I'm buying his books, so I think he's happy in general.
Now, language-wise, were these written in English or were they translated from...
he writes in English. That's actually an advantage in India, because I'm not sure if that happens in China, that there are actually quite a lot of people, a lot of authors who do write in English because of the English, the British rule, the
colonialism.
That English obviously is a major language in India as well, and a lot of people do write in English, so you don't even have to translate them.
So on those post-it notes, what are the kinds of things that you noted? I mean, you don't have to share specific things unless you want to. We're open here.
So it's just like small funny things that I sort of to portray the two very different cultures of those two different states they're coming from. When you highlight them, it's always like, oh my God, this is so funny. It's like, now I have to read them.
But because you've read the whole book and you've read multiple books of his, it may not seem significant to you, but I bet you it'll be interesting to the listeners.
But it's like some of that is also what I'm wondering is if it's if you take it out of context, you know, if it's still relevant. So what I feel with him is it's not, you know, those things that you highlight and you post on Bookstagram or wherever, and you're like, oh my God, this significant sentence that changes my life. It's just that, you know, it says a lot about the paragraphs.
And that's actually where I meant that Bookstagram moment to go to, and I completely got lost in my own question. So thank you for the opportunity to circle back to that. Were there any things that you Bookstagrammed about any of these books?
So the thing is now, again, my Bookstagram account started about 4 months ago. So very, very recent, actually. Hence, I basically started with the books that I really, really read either very recently or that I'm reading right now. In fact, I just finished for the last 3 months War and Peace.
You finished War and Peace. These are words not said together usually.
Yeah, I'm very proud. I would like to make it into the podcast. I read War and Peace. So I was bookstagramming a lot about either that or books that I'd recently read and finished, etc. And again, I'm reading also obviously a lot of books about various other cultures, either Indian or otherwise. And those are things that I'm trying to put in there, but just generally sort of what I'm reading. But I do post some quotes, not necessarily I haven't from those books, but from from War and Peace I did. Although, funny enough, it was about a German thing that he wrote, like a Russian book mentioning the Germans and their sort of how particular they are and everything. It made me laugh. So I posted that because I thought I'm not German enough that I can't laugh about myself as a German. So
no, it's good to laugh at ourselves.
In the book, a character mentions obviously it's in a war situation, and at that point Russians and Germans were working together on one side, if you would like, and sort of the one Russian general says, so I was out with this German general and he was starting to be particular, and once Germans start getting particular they just don't end. So sort of something along those lines, and it made me laugh. Somewhat true.
Were there any of those stereotypical examples in Chetan's book? Does he stereotype any Indians on any sort of jokish level in any of these books?
The funny thing is, like, I don't know how much of that is stereotyping in terms of cliche over the top, because I feel that a lot of that is actually also true.
Well, stereotypes exist for a reason.
Exactly. I feel like when I come back to India after this, they're gonna catch me at into immigration. It's like, what have you been talking about?
I can assure you right now, one, it will not be published by next week, and two, that I don't think I have any listeners in India yet.
We will change.
You're safe. I don't know if you want that right now. Just kidding.
Actually, Chetan Bhagat is very active on social media, Twitter, for instance. So I'm not sure he might not pick up on that. Mr. Bhagat, this is your chance.
Well, now you've kind of challenged me to include him when I publish this episode.
Why not?
I do things online. Since meeting him in person, have you tweeted him at all? Well, because you read these all before you met him, so you haven't read anything else. But
no.
Would you, if you read another book of his, would you social media him any reactions or questions?
I've been doing that actually quite actively with all my. For instance, last year I read Pachinko, which is about Korea, Japan story. The author is quite active on Instagram as well, so I included her as well, and so various as well. For instance, one of my favorite books last year was The Gospel According to Coco Chanel. It's so funny because Coco Chanel, obviously everybody just has the fashion house in mind. Many people will know about, like, there was a woman called Coco Chanel, and obviously her style is the Chanel style. And maybe you know about the scent, and maybe you know about the little black dress, but about finishes there. So actually one of my favorite books last year was The Gospel According to Coco Chanel. The author is Karen Carbo, and also very active on social media. So when I posted about her book, she liked it, which obviously made completely my day. That was a crazy book because really not a lot of people know about the story, and the book is very, like, it's not one of those dry biographies, but written in a very light and funny way. But it really shows how much of a feminist that woman was. Such a powerhouse woman, making her own fashion house in a time where women belonged in the kitchen, basically, and nothing else. Not working, and definitely not their own boss, sort of. So that was a fantastic book that I read. Stereotyping, basically, the thing that I was thinking about is always that stereotypes of Germans in India are always like Second World War related. And they laugh about that, and many Germans, me included, still very touchy-feely about that. And we cannot laugh about that. So I'm still very sort of, when people make jokes about that, I'm usually staying quiet. I'm not saying much about that, because
the interviewer part of me wants to ask you what they say, and the human part of me wants to, like, gently move on. But you've mentioned it in an interview, so you know the interviewer part of me is going to ask you.
No, we can talk about it. No,
okay.
Just in terms of making jokes about it, I find it still too tough, because it's just obviously, to an extent, what happened during that time. I find it's like, how can you joke about that on any level?
Slightly confusing me right now. How are they joking about it? Do you have
it's to one extent something that happens quite commonly, actually. It's the fact that if somebody is very particular about it, it's like, oh, don't be such a Hitler about it. Which is, yes, exactly. Thank you very much. And for me, it's like, you shouldn't say that.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
That's like
very connected tangent.
immediate.
Which doesn't make sense. Trevor Noah. He's from South Africa, but he's a late night show host in the US. Yeah. Have you read his book,
No, I
Born a
haven't.
Crime?
No.
Oh my gosh. Highly recommended. And there is a Hitler connection in there that I'm not going to spoil for you because, oh gosh, I don't think it'll be funny to you. Shoot.
Okay, now I definitely.
I don't know if it will be funny to you, but the end result of the story is not connected to, well, I don't know if it'll be funny, but the book is amazing.
Yes, yes.
It's truly amazing. And I do a lot on audio because I'm out and about more than I'm sitting still at this point in my life. I'm restless. And he actually read it in the audiobook form. So it was really spoiling to hear him tell the stories in his own voice. Because I think he's a pretty magnetic personality in addition to a lot of other traits of his. Yeah,
absolutely.
But there is a story with a character named Hitler that is not that Hitler.
And that's the problem, obviously, that you have people, even in India, you have people called Stalin. And because it's sometimes they don't know the background, the historical background, or almost the other extreme is that people really think that obviously Hitler was a bad person, but that he fought for the rights or for his country's people. So he stood up for Germans. And now I would like to point out that I think that is not the way to do it.
Right. No, agreed.
That's, there's other ways to do that and stand up for your own country's sake. But that's sort of what they think is maybe it's not all bad.
And to be fair, I'm not going to tell the story, but part of the point of Trevor Noah telling the story was to show that was the beginning of his awareness that things that he grew up with were not thought of the same in other cultures, even within South Africa.
Yeah.
So it was the beginning of his awareness of cultural sensitivity, shall we say.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So he does circle around. I'm just going to use that every other sentence. He does circle back to that moment.
New favorite word.
Boop, 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 boop. There's an elephant in the room right now. Oh gosh, that wasn't meant to be an Indian pun. That's just a phrase in English.
No, I didn't even realize.
But there is, because we've been talking about you reading this whole time, and you clearly have many languages at your disposal.
Oh, yeah.
So what language did you start reading in?
I always read in German in the beginning because what I have realized since I moved abroad is it's very, very uncommon, but is natural in German, is that everything gets translated, which means when English movies, either from the US or UK or whatever, come to Germany, they get translated. And so when we watch whatever the Marvel Universe or whatever, it's all German language. They speak German.
Oh, so the sound is dubbed over.
Yes, it's dubbed over, and there's not even English subtitles, nothing. And so, which is, I would say, is actually a disadvantage, because I realize now that other countries in Europe, where that's not the case, so where, for instance, the Scandinavian countries, they don't dub over, but they have local subtitles. The English of the natives there is much better, because they are sort of exposed to English as in spoken in America or UK, wherever, much earlier on. Basically, it's fantastic. You don't have that in German, which is probably the reason why there's such a horrible accent.
Most of my teaching English career was done in Northeast Asia, where there's a much stronger first language accent coming over. So yeah, I'm a little skewed in that regard. On the European spectrum, you're saying that there is a strong. Okay,
maybe it's just because it's from my own. And just So in Germany, everything is translated. It's movies, but also books. So you would never even think about picking up books, and you actually have to go to specific bookstores usually in the city center, which would have specific sections on English books. Otherwise, everything is German, basically. So hence, I would you learn English at a later stage in your life. So you read German, and you would read it very long.
So at what point in your multi-country trajectory did you start reading in English?
Once I knew that I would be studying abroad and would be studying in English, I started more and more. The first thing was I was watching English movies in English, just to get started, basically, and getting a head start on understanding, etc. And then I think I was reading a little bit in English, but it's just, I think you try to avoid it probably. It's just easier to read in your native.
It's not relaxing if you have to like constantly think about what you're reading.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or like pick up dictionaries to understand certain things, etc. Then again, I moved obviously for studies, which meant that immediately I had to read in English, and that just made it much easier. And then I also didn't have a choice anymore. I had to pick up books in English because in German was nothing available anymore. And so anyway, then I moved to the UK and there's only books in English available. So from then on, I realized from then on and still I'm reading books, especially written in English. I read only in English, and the only books that I read in German is basically written by German authors.
That makes sense. I mean, if you can read it in the original language, why wouldn't you? Yeah.
Exactly. The only question obviously becomes what's available, and that's when I have made a point now that when I go to Germany, I go to bookstore, I take the next person that looks somewhat sort of, you seem to have an idea of what you're doing here. And I said, looks like I am German, I'm living abroad. What's the big thing right now in Germany? What are people reading? So that I pick up something like that, basically.
Okay, so you've got German and obviously English. What other languages do you have at your disposal for reading books?
For reading books, nothing
reading
else.
Books, nothing.
I've this is getting very embarrassing. I learned Russian actually as my second language.
How is that embarrassing? That's impressive. No, to these ears, that's very impressive.
That's true. But the thing is that having had Russian in school for, I think, about 6 years, I cannot read a book in Russian. I can read the letters in terms of they have a different alphabet.
Sure,
right?
yeah, Cyrillic,
So I can read it. I can't understand what it tells me. Or let's say I do certain words, like, those little like and or the that kind of stuff I understand. I'm very happy with that, but not the book. That was my third language. I had French for a couple of weeks in hotel school. I had Italian for 8 weeks in hotel school, and my Hindi is more than basic, and I can't read the script. That's another thing, right? Because India has all those different languages, Hindi being the main one, but you have those local languages and accents and whatnot.
If you were to sum up your experience with these books,
it's been fantastic. And I think one question she did send me, it's like I've been recommending those books right, left, and center to people. Specifically people that said they like to read, basically. Yeah. Now, I also have to say that I recommended it to my book club recently. Unfortunately, I wasn't in Mumbai anymore when the book club discussed it. I think from what I got feedback from them, they didn't like it that much, because I'm not sure why, but the thing is that I'm always making sure to say, look, it's very simple. It certainly is not War and Peace. It's not Shakespeare or anything. I'm really reading it as a foreigner coming to India about the society and to learn a little bit more about what's going on there. Things that, especially I find, again, I'm married to an Indian. I have the direct intel on a lot of those things and somebody to ask. And if he doesn't know, then probably somebody he knows that I could ask. However, for many expat couples where both are non-Indian, maybe the husband through his work will have some contacts to an Indian, but those are not the people you would generally ask questions, It's like, where did you study? Did anybody of your colleague, of your peers ever commit suicide? That
no. Wow, that would be awkward.
Over coffee and a coffee break, basically. That's something that I basically learned from those books. And I'm not saying that this intel is like spot on and the truth and there's nothing else to learn about India or whatsoever. There's a multitude on religions, regions, etc., etc. It's just, it opens up your mind about how much there is and how much to learn. And maybe some questions to ask if ever you get to meet an Indian that you can ask questions, basically.
Here's a bad analogy for you. Just like one person isn't what you need for the rest of your life. I mean, not one book isn't going to fulfill everything you need to know about any one place.
And that's something where I loved having a book club that is local, was a local book club. I loved talking to my expat book club about expat books that are all over the world, and that was fantastic. But especially when it comes to India, obviously it was great to have a book club of Indians, with Indians. However, I have to say, if you go to book club to people who read a lot and who know they read a lot and talk about those books, if I come with those books to them, they, it's like roll their eyes. It's like, oh my God, is this all you read? And it's like, no, but again, the point is for them, what is boring for them, I can completely understand, is I learn a lot from those books that for them is just a day-to-day life that they've grown up with. That's so normal. Why would you read that? But it's something that I would have never found out probably.
Have his books not sold well in India?
No, not at all. That's actually the funny thing. I think it's a bit the thing. I think you have that everywhere, where you have authors that people who like to think of themselves of, no, I'm a reader and I'm not sure what the word is. Like, it's like I'm better.
Snooty, snobby, elitist.
Snobby, sort of, I know better than to read Chetan Bhagat, sort of. But then there's enough people who either don't care really, or who, I don't know, it's like just read whatever, It's like, and quite frankly, it's like I literally read everything.
Yeah.
And I have to, I will never forget when I was in Dubai, I had just gotten my Kindle, and I had heard about 50 Shades of Grey. However, this being Dubai, where obviously certain things are just not, the book wasn't really discussed or very broadly advertised. You could buy it in stores, but I think there was even a tag on there, 18 plus, something like that. That's all. So I never got the notice of what it was about, but I only knew that everybody was talking about it. So I had picked up the Kindle and I downloaded the sample, and I read the sample and it's like, well, that sounds interesting, but the sample never got to this point where it gets very explicit. It didn't reach there, but you noticed that something was fishy, something was going on. So I was sitting in a coffee shop and I was like, oh damn it, I want to know what happens. I downloaded the first book and I'm sitting in this, UAE, Dubai. Dubai is very, very obviously liberal compared to the rest of the Middle East. However, it's still Dubai, it's still the Middle East. And I was sitting there and I was reading and suddenly got to the point and I was like, oh my God. And I was like completely turned red and I was looking around, can anybody read what I read here? And that was sort of, I was like, oh my God. So I read sort of 50 Shades of Grey, and I read all those 3 books because I thought it was not Shakespeare or anything, but I thought it was actually quite a gripping story, leaving all the explicits aside. That got a little much, I felt at some point. I was like, oh, come on, But there was actually some story to that as well, and I don't have a problem with reading that. But I also read War and Peace. I love Jane Austen.
Exactly. Why wouldn't you read The Range? I mean, exactly. No, I read it too, and I was working with 2 girlfriends at the time, and we were reading it kind of accidentally at the same time. And we'd walk in and like show our posters and go, "Did you get to this part yet? Oh my God," kind of thing. And I was hesitant to watch the movie, and I did, and I was like, how did you leave all of this out? Like all of the interesting parts, I feel like were just like cut. And I didn't watch a censored version anywhere. I would just watch the whole version of the movie.
And quite
like,
frankly,
what?
I don't even know. The movie, I think, came out when we were in India, and India is censoring, but not to the point that the Middle East censors. I think I still haven't watched the whole movie uncensored because you can't get hold of it, basically. And I read the books, and I think many readers will agree that just usually the books are much better.
And in this case, it's so true. Again, not that it's like the most groundbreaking whatever story or whatever, but it is a page turner. I got through it super fast.
I agree, and that was, again, it's not a book that I would read over and over again. And again, I think it's also how different it is. I've never read anything like that before, and especially like so graphic and so forth, and to the extreme it gets. And it's certainly not something I would pick up again, but it's for that one time, I think it was brilliant.
So there's a movie I watched on the plane last month called Book Club. Have you seen this movie?
Oh, yes.
Okay, yeah, because they read 50 Shades of Grey.
Right. Yes,
Yeah. Actually, I think they get through all 3 of the books by the end. I forget. I know they definitely did the second one.
I think they start with the first, and everybody's like, "Oh, come on, we're not going to read that, etc., etc." And then they start, and just like what you were saying, once you get into it, it's I couldn't put it down.
It's hard to read that book and compare your life to it.
And what I thought was so brilliant about, obviously not just taking the book club reading that book, but also obviously that the book club is not young girl, you know? It's the older generation, and I think that's a whole different twist then to the movie and discussing a book, etc.
And even so, I love the fact that they did think about their lives and make changes. It's like you think, oh, after a certain point, your life is just set. Oh no, there are drastic changes that happened. And I was just watching it going, this is an awesome movie. First of all, there's a movie about a book club. I'm in.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't care how boring or interesting this is. I'm watching the whole damn thing.
Somehow I have other like Indian authors and so forth, and I've read some as well. Don't nail me down on that. But it's just that I'm really trying to read just anything that is sort of all over the place. I'm really diversifying my reading. And that just means also, as I was saying, Pachinko last year and Exit West, another fantastic book I thought I read last year. So just a little bit about everything.
I go through phases where I want to read about a specific country or city or place. And
That's true. And that's so bad with me right now. I was Pachinko time also. I think Pachinko got me into that South Korean culture, like pop culture.
Yeah.
The movies. I think
oh my
it's
God,
very
they're so
similar to
good.
Yeah, exactly. And so I got a lot into that, and I haven't really gotten into books there yet, but I've been told they're also similar, like books that are very similar to those movies.
Yeah, and I'm surprised I haven't been dragged into, although I've never lived in Korea, I've been in Northeast Asia long enough that I should be watching Korean soap operas. I do love K-pop and J-pop music.
But Pachinko was obviously because it's Korean moving into Japan, etc., etc. I read something else, and now that's why I bought the book now from China to read a Chinese author. But just there's so much, and obviously I read Crazy Rich Asians.
Oh,
have you read it?
Hold on, I'm thinking. I have not read the book. I have seen the movie. Yeah. And sometimes when I see the movie, I can't go backwards.
That's very ideal too. And I specifically, when I noticed that there's a movie coming out that the book I haven't read but I wanted to read, I don't watch the movie because I know I won't go
Have you seen the movie?
Yes, I have.
And you've read the book. So is the book better?
So I have read all the 3 books.
Oh, there's 3. Okay, yeah. Oh, that's right, because the second one they're actually going to film in mainland China.
Oh.
Right?
Yes, because there's quite a few, they've set quite a few pieces in China.
So in general, the books versus the movies for that one or that series?
I thought it was brilliant, actually. The book, I thought it makes definitely sense to read the book first and to read it, but I thought the movie had a great jump on the book in terms of the lavishness of the lifestyle, and because I think that's really, again, it's not a sort of masterpiece of literature, but again, it's a piece that gives you a lot about the culture. And again, my husband being Chinese, this whole idea like ama and the hong paos and certain things that I just knew. And I was laughing so much because I remembered when I came and met my husband's family for the first time. And now I want to make a shout out here. They are not crazy rich. So that's a whole different level. But she comes into this huge family where thousands of people and everybody is somehow related to one another. But I came basically during Chinese New Year in Kolkata, India, and I met his family for the first time. And as I was just telling you on the way here, he has 29 cousins from his mom's side alone. And to come as a German looking white and having a family, my family is literally my dad, my mom, my brother, and one uncle with his wife and 2 cousins. That's all. And then I come to this massive family, and literally we did just one day, as you do during Chinese New Year, and you just hop from family home to family home. And it's going, coming, and new people all the time. And I remember after 12 hours of that, coming back to the hotel, headache as hell. And it's like, okay, we need to sit down. Yeah. Who are all those people? To some extent, I could relate to her. It's like, what is going on?
There's so much going on. Actually, now I'm remembering it was Awkwafina, the comedian. She's the reason why I watched the movie first, because I've fallen in love with her work, and her sense of humor is it's so funny to me. It's so funny.
So I didn't know any of that because it's obviously it's American movie in terms of a lot of them are American Chinese actors.
Well, actually, one of the main guys is Filipino. There were people from various quote unquote Asian Asian backgrounds, and that's what pissed a lot of people off, is that it wasn't, not Chinese or Singaporean or,
Exactly.
So,
but okay. So American Asian, you could say, basically.
Yeah. And they kept saying, oh, it's an all Asian cast. This is so rare. It's like, no, in the world, in Asian countries, that's the norm. So it's just the way they premised it really, really put a lot of people off. But I think as a movie, it was very cute.
Yes. And I still think I'm still pushing for it in terms of that's a Hollywood movie
of
with
course.
an all Asian cast.
Yeah.
And I think that I still think that's worthwhile celebrating, that you just need to sort of it's diversifying people's views of the world. There is not just white people.
I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But the thing is that it's diversifying them, but as one culture. They're not. I mean, somebody in the Philippines is a very different culture. And I shouldn't even be sticking up for them because I'm not from any of these cultures, but I will try, maybe. But I mean, somebody from the Philippines versus somebody from mainland China versus somebody from Singapore.
The funny thing is, look, also me coming from Germany, being in Germany, I remember saying that Far East Asian people all look the same to me. That is so cliche, but it's true. It was true at that point, right? And they all look the same to me. Now I'm so impressed because I was living in Asia. A lot of Asians coming to Dubai as well when I was living there. A lot of Filipinos there, and now that I'm watching Korean Korean pop TV shows as well. I was coming into Shanghai at the airport, and I was like, "Oh my God, look, they're from Korea, right? Oh my God, look, they're from Japan." And I'm so impressed with myself that I'm even able to tell the difference. And but this is something that you can only do once you're somehow thrown out there and sort of meeting people. One of my best friends from the studying time, he is half Filipino, and I was traveling in the Philippines, and now I'm here in China, and I know people. Obviously, I'm in India. India is Asia as well, but you couldn't be more diverse and different from comparing India to China, obviously. So yeah, now I know that, but obviously for people living in Europe or in sort of US, you can just throw
no. And it goes both ways. Even in Shanghai, which is very cosmopolitan in many parts, there is still some places where if you go to a local restaurant or cafe or something and there are only two white foreigners, let's be specific, they might confuse your drinks because they can't see the difference in our faces either. It really does go both ways. And it's not necessarily with a like a prejudice behind it. It's just I'm not familiar with the differences of where to look. Is it the eyes? Is it the nose? Is it the mouth? And it just,
Exactly, yeah. And I've been told that as well. And we had the same thing in India as well, where I have a very good friend of mine, and she happens to be German as well. And wherever I would meet her and she would be there already, I would come into a restaurant. Oh, your friend's over there. Already being told, because obviously the one expat in the restaurant and another one coming in, you guys must know each other. Yes. How else could it be?
This happens to me so often. And I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm sure you're a nice person, but I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I don't know that person.
No. This is odd. For the future bookish episodes of Expat Rewind, what questions are missing? What else should I ask people? You've already given me 2 ideas. One about the book covers and 2 about movies and books and of the book versions. And so you've given me 2. So we can skip this question or...
I think what I just hit my mind is like in terms of bookish places. You had told me about the restaurant, that here, the Press, which is sort of book related, but just about other bookish places where you go, where you read, your bookish, like what you were saying, that your bookstore that you go to is a happy place, and those type of places, maybe. That's like...
You know what I do after people give me a question to use in future interviews? I turn it on them. Yeah. So you get to pick, because you were living near Mumbai and now you're in Goa. So either place, what is a bookish place you can share with our listeners?
Well, actually, it's always obviously it's a quiet place in terms of, I can also read in a Starbucks, for instance. That's fine too. However, I think it helps when there's a sort of Zen atmosphere in the place.
Can you give us a specific place? Yes, and we promise not to go and stalk you.
when you come to Goa, you can probably find me there, and you're more than welcome to talk to me there. However, there's a few expats there, so please be careful. So in Goa, I'm very close living to the capital city of Goa, which is Panjim, and they have a little slightly secluded gallery museum type of thing, very small, quiet, and they have a courtyard, and around that courtyard is a cafe, basically. That cafe seating during summertime, it's outdoor seating. In the rain time, it's basically only on the porch. And it's just a small little cafe. They have very nice coffee, food also, but it's just that sort of gallery feel around it, and secluded, this closed courtyard feel, and it's not like buzzing with tourists, but very, very nice. So I absolutely love that place. It's called Cafe Bodega.
Yeah, Bodega.
Well, otherwise, in Mumbai, I have to give a shout out here. I love chai, like the Indian chai. I drink tea anyway, but Indian chai specifically. And there is a chai at Taj Mahal Tea House. I think that's memorable. In Bandra, Mumbai. And my friends will laugh now because they know I like, you can find me there probably almost every other day or something. And it's a brilliant place because it's like a bungalow they renovated inside and out, which is a special thing in Mumbai. You usually only do up the inside. So it's done up inside and out, and it has this really old world charm, and it has those different seating. You can have your own armchair where you can rest. They have books standing everywhere, so if you forgot your own book. And then they have those terrific chais, different chais, basically vanilla coconut chai. When you go there, I can only recommend. And the staff there is fantastic.
We need to go right now.
Yes.
Plane. Let's get back on a plane. You can get yeah, we can do this. We can be back in a few hours.
Yeah. We head out.
Oh, the thing I was going to tell you earlier. I'm going to keep this in here because I'll just include a rec of my own. Why not? Garden Books in Shanghai. They have... Oh, no. Say, what?
I went there.
Did you go?
Yes.
Did you have the gelato? Which seems like a weird combination for Shanghai, but ice cream's not really a Chinese thing, so they tend to bring in European ice creams and whatnot, which is wise because the American ice cream sucks. So why not include chocolate and other things? But anyway, the point is they have, I don't even know where the gelato is from, but it is disturbingly good, like global good, not just good for China.
Oh my God. No,
and so, yeah, and you can actually they have this, things change a lot in Shanghai, but last time I was there, they had this sampler thingy where you could pick 3 flavors. And I believe it was 3 flavors in a coffee or something like that for a certain price. It's not cheap. It's Shanghai, but it's Garden Books. So you've got a variety of local and foreign books in English and in other languages.
Yeah. Among them, for instance, German, which completely blew me away. It's like, I looked through those German books, like most random. I was like, wow.
Too funny, yeah. And they have the gelato, so you can sit in there. And because there's so many cafes in that neighborhood, it is not generally packed. It's one of the few places in Shanghai you can go and get a seat. It's
gorgeous also to walk. I love that street around there, and it's beautiful. And otherwise, the international bookstore that I went to, they don't have coffee as far as I know, but they have like the selection of books there I found impressive, both in terms of foreign authors, but also Chinese books in English. So that was really, really great.
Fuzhou, Fuzhou. That's basically Book Street. It's funny, one of the books that's behind you was, the story in it revolves around this family that had, if I remember right, the entire block or 2 of Fuzhou, because it's not that long of a street. Yeah. So because people had very large properties at the time that the book was written, and so the family had that street.
Wow.
And so I was reading that after being a big fan of the bookstores and the calligraphy shops and all that's on Fuzhou. Right, I'm reading that going, you owned the whole street. That street. Are you kidding? And it's a true story. Yeah. So I forget the name of the book right now because my brain is fried, but I will put it down in the show notes for the listeners, and I will definitely tell you as soon as we move that chair. I have the world's smallest living room, by the way. But yeah, I can't thank you enough for coming here and doing this. This is so much fun.
Me so last minute. This was literally a matter of 2 weeks.
No, this is what the internet is for.
Shout out to Instagram.
Seriously, shout out to Instagram, to Nicole, to all kinds of things that make stuff like this possible. And shout out to all of the free software that goes into making this podcast. And of course to the lovely listeners who listen to these long conversations about bookish expat-y things. Yes. And future episodes like this. Yes. Very cool. Oh, we can't forget the most important thing. If listeners want to connect with you online, how should they do that?
Yes, please do. So as I mentioned, actually now during the podcast, I have 2 channels. One is the Expat channel. The Instagram is Craving Expat Life. And the book is My Kingdom for a Book.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, Shakespeare sort of. It's my horse for a book, but for a kingdom. But it's here my book for a kingdom. Shit, I need to take it.
That's fine. I'll put it down in the show notes. Whichever way it goes, I'll put it down in the show notes. Yeah.
Contact me either book-wise or expat-wise. I'm happy.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
And while we're thanking everybody, let me thank you, the wonderful listeners of Bookish Expats. It's because of you that I've continued to make this podcast in all of its incarnations. Additionally, Damon Castillo has graciously allowed us to use his music from the Mess of Me album on this podcast. You can find his information at damoncastillo.com. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or want to volunteer to be a guest on Bookish Expats, please do contact me at Steffuccio, STPHFUCCIO, and that is my handle absolutely everywhere. It's also my Gmail address. We'll also be adding Bookish Expats social media once we get closer to July. Thank you so much, and more soon.
School is back, and so is the JCPenney Mystery Sale. How much will you save? Hurry in store for a coupon giveaway while they last. You could peel and reveal an extra 30, 40, or even 50% off store-wide. Sale ends Sunday. Extended store hours Friday and Saturday. Shopping is back, and the savings are too. JCPenney. Coupon valid on select styles through 8/7. Exclusions apply. Giveaway in-store only. Must be 18 years or older. See store or jcp.com for details.
Do it!
Ask Sherwin-Williams during the Endless Summer Sale, August 26th through September 5th, and get 30% off paints and stains with prices starting at $29.39. That means 30% off our most popular color family, blue. Psychologists have found it to be soothing and relaxing, which makes it especially great for bedrooms and bathrooms. And of course, 30% off all of our other colors. Shop the sale online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.